Oh, no, that's. What do you want to do with this? Oh, I gave it a podium. That is. Right part? That finger. The fingers aren't that better. Hey, very live. This is how live I am. We're actually live.
Ryan, genius, right? So good. You get the TED Talk thing? I kind of stole their idea. So. I don't want to be in that photo.
Welcome Agnes Irwin parents, alumni, and friends. You can call me Agnes. We are so happy you have joined us this evening for our special presentation, The Evolving World of Artificial Intelligence. Though I am fully capable of running this show, I have been programmed to share the stage. Please welcome Head of School, Sally Keidel.
Good evening and welcome. I am so delighted to welcome you to our evening program, The Evolving World of Artificial Intelligence, a discussion featuring our Agnes Irwin visiting scholar, Professor Meredith Broussard. At Agnes Irwin, our faculty colleagues have been exploring artificial intelligence in education and engaging with their colleagues here and nationally about this changing landscape. We are grateful to Professor Broussard, who brings an expertise that has helped us in beginning to understand the implications of this technology for the pre-K to 12 setting. We look forward to seeing how these lessons will impact how we teach, learn, and strive for excellence in the future. So it is now my honor to introduce Professor Broussard to you. A pioneering researcher in the field of computational empowerment, Professor Broussard combines perspectives from journalism, scholarly research, and technical work that sit at the intersection of technology, journalism, and ethics. Professor Broussard holds the titles of Associate Professor at the Arthur L. Carter Journalism Institute of the New York University and Research Director at the NYU Alliance for Public Interest Technology. She is a nationally published writer with bylines in the New York Times, The Atlantic, and Slate. Professor Broussard is our visiting scholar and educator in residence for this academic school year. Her presence and example will keep inspiring our exploration at Agnes Irwin of the opportunities and complexities of learning, living, and navigating in a globalized world. I am grateful to the many in our community that have already benefited from her example and guidance, including our students, faculty, and professional staff, the Center for the Advancement of Girls, the Learning and Innovation team, and our Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging team. We're also grateful for the support and generosity of Goldman Sachs and the Clower Speaker Family Speaker Fund for making tonight possible. Moderating tonight's discussion is Maiken Scott. Maiken is the host and executive producer of WHYY's The Pulse, a national health and science radio show and podcast that explores the people and places at the heart of health and science. We are grateful to her as well for joining us this evening. Next, we will show you a video that introduces Professor Broussard's research and features classroom programs and activities related to our ongoing exploration of topics in artificial intelligence. I hope you enjoy it and the rest of tonight's program. Thank you for being here.
AI is just math. It's really beautiful, complicated, elegant math, but ultimately it's just math. My name is Meredith Broussard. I'm a data journalism professor at NYU, and I'm the author of a new book called More Than a Glitch, Confronting Race, Gender, and Ability Bias in Tech. Being the visiting scholar at Agnes Irwin was really delightful for me. There's something different and special about the energy of K through 12 students. The teachers here at Agnes Irwin are just incredible. They really know their stuff, technologically speaking, and they also have a really keen sense of what is age-appropriate learning. So it was really a joy for me to get to collaborate with them to design lessons around AI and gear those lessons to what was appropriate for each grade level. The term artificial intelligence implies that there's a little brain inside the computer. We imagine that it has human-like capacity. This can lead to problems when people start building AI systems in order to solve social problems. One of the things that's been really fun about working with the girls at Agnes Irwin is seeing all the amazing things that they have invented, seeing them using their imaginations and building technology. If I had to pick one word to describe an Agnes Irwin classroom, it would be lively. Every single classroom I visited, the girls engaged with the lesson. They drew connections between different ideas. It was just some really sophisticated thinking on display. As a journalist, I write a lot about problems, but ultimately I am actually optimistic because I've met the next generation. I really hope that the girls feel confident in understanding computer systems as things that are created by human beings. And these are systems that can be understood and can be created, can be challenged.
Please welcome Agnes Irwin, visiting scholar, New York University professor, data journalist, and author, Meredith Broussard.
Okay, thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, Sally. It is such a delight and a joy to be here with you at Agnes Irwin tonight. As you saw in the movie, I have had a ton of fun being the inaugural visiting scholar this year. Parents in the room, your daughters are brilliant. They're doing great. And so what I'm going to do tonight is I'm going to talk a little bit about a couple of the things that I spoke with your girls about. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about artificial intelligence. And in fact, we're going to talk specifically about generative AI, about ChatGPT and all the other stuff. And we're going to talk about how that relates to some of the material that is in my new book. The new book is called More Than a Glitch: Confronting Race, Gender, and Ability Bias in Tech. So I have some slides. All right, here we are. All right, so as you saw in the movie, AI is math, right? When you think about AI, probably the first thing that comes to mind is maybe the Terminator, or maybe one of these lovely little Disney type characters. This is actually the slide that I used when I was talking to the elementary and middle school girls about artificial intelligence. Sometimes I use a slide that has the Terminator on it, but I felt like that would be inappropriate for the little ones. But everybody loves robots, right? Robots are really fun. They're really great for the imagination, but it's really important to keep in mind what's imaginary and what's real, right? So real AI is math. Math is great. It's not going to rise up and take over. We are not in danger of a robot apocalypse because we're not in danger of a mathematical apocalypse. Right? So this is how I start the book. This is how I start all of my conversations about AI, because it grounds us in reality and it allows us to talk about the actual social issues that are going on. So what happens in the book? It starts with a hype-free explanation of what AI is and isn't. And I look at examples of ways that AI has been used to harm people in the justice system, in medicine, in education, and more. And then I finish with some options for change. Those are narrative change, algorithmic auditing, algorithmic accountability journalism, and a variety of responsible AI resources. I know we have some responsible AI folks in the room today. So this is what we're going to talk about today. Okay. One of the things that I think is really important is not to get distracted about with conversations about existential harms related to AI. What our conversations should focus on is real harms that are being experienced by real people right now. So this is relevant when we have conversations about generative AI, because probably you have had conversations about generative AI, right? You've probably had conversations about large language models, about ChatGPT, about Bard, about how AI is going to steal all of our jobs, and where various industries are going to collapse in the next 6 months. It's all drama, right? AI is definitely going to change some things, but it's not the invention of fire. Okay. So how does generative AI work? Let's talk a little bit about that. When you make artificial intelligence, when you make a machine learning system, you actually do the same thing every time. What you do is you take a whole bunch of data that is in the case of generative AI, it's sourced from the web, right? So you take a whole bunch of data and you feed it into the computer and you say, computer, make me a model. And the computer says, okay. And it makes a model, and the model shows the mathematical patterns in the data. And then you can use that model to make predictions, recommendations, new patterns, right? So you can generate new things, or you can predict things like what kind of deodorant somebody is going to want to buy. Or you can recommend something like, here is another episode of Paw Patrol that your kid might want to watch. And it works beautifully, except when it doesn't, right? There's this principle called the unreasonable effectiveness of data, which means that when you feed in enough data, you get these enormously accurate predictions, these enormously accurate recommendations, these enormously accurate patterns generated, but they are not unfailingly accurate, right? So what's happening with ChatGPT is they took a whole bunch of data from, among other places, a data set called Common Crawl, which collected millions and millions of web pages, fed it into the computer, said, computer, make me a model. Computer said, okay. And it made a model. And then ChatGPT is using that model to generate new sentences, right? So there's no sense, there's no meaning attached to the sentences that ChatGPT is generating, or any generative AI. There's no underlying meaning. They're just patterns, because to the computer, a word is just a string of letters and spaces, right? A sentence is just a pattern of letters and spaces, right? So we interact with ChatGPT and we think that something is happening because we have this wonderful human tendency to anthropomorphize things. We want to see the human in everything, but there is no human there. There is no little brain. It's not really interacting with you, but it's very easy to think that it is, right? So maybe this changes your mind about whether generative AI is going to change everything. Like I said, it's going to change some things, but not everything. Image generators work the same way. When you get an image generator like DALL-E to generate a picture of a guitar, you can do it because you've fed in, the people who made it have fed in pictures of guitars. When you want a picture of a panda, it can generate a picture of a panda because pictures of pandas have been fed in, they've been labeled as panda. And then if you want a picture of a panda playing a guitar, then it can make one because we fed in enough data about pandas playing guitars, right? It can make a new pattern. And in fact, did anybody have a daughter who came home talking about a panda playing a guitar? because we definitely did an AI lesson based on pandas and guitars, right? So I want to talk a little bit more about this Common Crawl data set that is used to feed ChatGPT, because there was this fantastic story that came out in the Washington Post recently. And I talked about it like 5 times this morning with the upper school girls, and I realized I really need to make a slide about this. So this is a brand new slide for me. And this is a really terrific story from the Post. It's called Inside the Secret List of Websites That Make AI Like ChatGPT Sound Smart. Because what you can do is you can look at the training data that was used to feed an AI system, right? So people have made a big deal about, oh, ChatGPT 4, we don't know what's in it. Like, it's actually the same stuff that was in GPT 3, like plus some more stuff. But we know it was in GPT 3 because it's written in an academic paper that is published online, right? So this is one of the things that data journalists do. We go and we take on the extremely boring task of reading the documentation, right? Like, when was the last time you ever read the documentation or the terms of service for something? Like, nobody does it, but it's part of my job to do it. And like, you actually find really interesting stuff in there. So how is ChatGPT made? How are the other things made? Well, we know because there is something called C4, the Colossal Clean Crawled Corpus, which is based on the Common Crawl data set. And again, they use scrapers or spiders to just go around the internet, copy web pages, scrape them, grab them, and then stick them into this big data set. All machine learning systems are basically drinking from the same well. There are these huge repositories of big data sets because data scientists were kind of lazy is one of our big secrets. We don't really like making data sets as much as we like making things based on training data. So the people who make the training data, like, bless them for doing it. And everybody just tends to like use the same set of things. There's this great newsletter called Data is Plural, which is about weird data sets out there. And one of my favorites recently is a data set that shows pictures of and characteristics of and Latin names of hundreds of thousands of different kinds of beans. Who knew there were so many kinds of beans? But you can take the bean data set and you can make a machine learning model based on it. And I don't know, you could use it for something agricultural, bean identification maybe. So what's in the Colossal Clean Crawled Corpus? We can look at it and we can see. All right, do I have a pointer here? I do not have a pointer. It mostly depends on a Google set of patents, right? ChatGPT is trained on patents. It's trained on Wikipedia. It's trained on Coursera, Instructables, right? It's just trained on the really big things that come up first in search results. Is anybody a little disappointed by that? Yeah, right? Like, it's not something like super smart and secret. It's just the thing that's out there. But another really important thing about this reporting is they show what is the toxic sludge that things like ChatGPT are trained on. And it is trained on material like the white supremacist site stormfront.org. It's trained on a corpus from 4chan. It's trained on anti-LGBTQ content. It's trained on stuff that you would not want in a training data set for a program that is generating stuff that your kids are going to use, right? So we need to be more critical of how these systems are constructed, who's constructing these systems, and we need to make different assumptions about the output of these systems. We need to understand that all of the bad stuff in the world is in the training data for AI systems, as well as some of the good stuff, right? Wikipedia, pretty interesting. Couple of problems with like, I think there's some sexism in Wikipedia. not really enough women represented in Wikipedia, right? So we can use a different frame, which is one that comes from Ruha Benjamin in her book, Race After Technology. And this is the idea that AI systems or automated systems discriminate by default. For a very long time, we've had this perception, which I label techno-chauvinism, right? It's the perception that AI systems or computational systems in general are superior, that they're neutral or objective or unbiased. And that's really not true. What this is a perspective, particularly biased perspective, that comes from a small and homogeneous group of people who, by the way, happen to make and sell computers. Okay? So if we have a more holistic view, if we assume that we're going to find flaws, human flaws inside our AI systems, then it becomes easier to spot the problems. And so this is one of the things that data journalists do. We spot problems. And like I said, we also talk about solutions. So let's talk about some of the problems. How am I on time, by the way? I'm good? Where's my timer? All right, I got 5 minutes. All right. Some examples of AI discrimination. The Markup, which is a really terrific algorithmic accountability news organization, did a story about the secret bias hidden in mortgage approval algorithms. It turns out that mortgage approval algorithms are 40 to 80% more likely to deny borrowers of color as opposed to their white counterparts. Right? It's not because the developers of the system were actively trying to oppress people. It's because of a couple of reasons, including unconscious bias on the part of the developers and centuries of financial discrimination reflected in the data, right? Because how do you make a mortgage approval algorithm? You take a whole bunch of data about who's gotten mortgages in the past, you feed it into the computer, computers make a model, makes a model, mathematical patterns, then it makes new recommendations on who should get a mortgage. Well, who's gotten mortgage in the past? Well, let's take a sociological perspective on it. We know there's a history of residential segregation in the United States. We know there's a history of redlining. We know that systemic discrimination exists. So what the model is doing, what the ML system is doing, what the AI is doing, is reflecting the problems of the past and then carrying them forward into the future. But because these problems are embedded in the mortgage approval system, they become harder to see and much harder to eradicate. So we need a new mindset. I also have gender shades up here. This was the subject of coded bias. I hope you all came to the showing. It was a lot of fun. There is also a famous case of an Amazon recruiting tool. Right? We talked about this in the upper school today, where Amazon was trying to make an AI system that would sort through resumes. And they fed in data about who had succeeded, whose resumes had succeeded at Amazon in the past. Well, think about what you know about the demographics of who works at Amazon. Now, what this AI did is it kicked out everybody, it kicked out all the women. It kicked out anybody who had on their resume that they attended a women's college. It kicked out anybody who had on their resume that they played a women's sport. Because when you play a women's sport, it says women's in it. The National Basketball Association players play in the NBA, but women play in the WNBA, the Women's National Basketball Association, right? So there are, even if we tried to eliminate bias by doing something like taking names off of resumes, it would not be enough. Okay. So Amazon, to their credit, did scrap this secret AI recruiting tool. But we definitely are going to see more in the coming years about AI in hiring. There's a new study out from Wired and Lighthouse Reports called Suspicion Machines. Definitely recommend checking it out. And for my nerds in the audience, there's a 50-page methodology document that goes with this about how they achieved this investigation, which is really great. So what can we do? All right, are your shoulders up around your ears? Are you feeling clenched? All right, I have an answer. You ready? You buy my book. And the other thing we can do is we can emphasize AI reality. We can talk with each other. We can talk with our girls about what's real and what's imaginary about AI. We can empower them so they don't feel afraid of AI, So they can look at AI like, oh, this is something that is made by people. It has flaws just like people do. And we can, we can have agency over this. We can be involved in the decisions that go into making these tools or using these tools. We can have a voice. We can look for human problems inside artificial intelligence systems, inside automated systems. There was some very strong language that came out from the Federal Trade Commission today. If we have any FTC watchers here, maybe we have a couple lawyers in the room. All right, FTC, strong worded letter. There is no legal exemption for automated systems. Automated systems need to obey the law. And actually, they haven't been for a really long time, which is surprising to a lot of people, but I don't know. I'm used to it now. We can test tech for accessibility. We can do algorithmic auditing, which is the process of looking at algorithms to find out exactly how they're biased and can they be remediated. And then also a new field called public interest technology, which is about making technology in the public interest. Can learn from journalists. And because I'm a professor, of course, I'm going to give you a reading list, right? Here are a bunch of things that you can read, you can watch, you can learn from, you can read and watch and listen with your kids and have more conversations about intersectional issues inside our technological systems. And because I really want you to engage with this material, I have not one slide, but 2 slides about things to read, watch, and learn, because there has been an explosion of work in this area in the past 5 years, which is really terrific for all of us. So with that, I'm going to say thank you, and I'm going to welcome up Mike and Scott.
Thank you. Thank you. So Meredith, you have emphasized a few times during your talk that, AI is not taking over the world. However, you did acknowledge there are some areas that will definitely change. So what are some of those areas that will definitely change?
So one of the things that I think will definitely change is boring writing.
Okay.
Right. So what people get very, well, journalists especially get really worried about AI because people have been threatening journalist jobs for a really long time. Like every time there's a new innovation, they're like, oh yeah, the journalists are definitely going to be eliminated now. But like we are hanging on, like we are still here. Storytelling never stops being interesting. And if you play with ChatGPT, or any of the other generative AI systems, which I absolutely encourage you to do. You absolutely should. They're super nifty and fun to play with. You quickly discover that what they generate is kind of boring. One of the things I heard is that it has the voice of a 35-year-old compliance lawyer. And I apologize if there are any compliance lawyers in the room. So yeah, mundane writing is probably going to, could be handled theoretically by AI tools. We all do a lot of boring writing. I send about 5 billion emails a day that are not setting the world on fire, but there's still going to be a role for creativity, for originality. One of the things that's important to keep in mind is that generative AI can only generate things based on what has come before. So it does things that it has seen already. Only humans can make what's creative and new.
So it's a bit like the suggested text we see when we're getting
exactly
an email
Yep.
and then it suggests like circling back or whatever,
Yep.
whatever we say in the corporate world.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit like that.
It's just like that.
Can you remember a time maybe when you really noticed this issue? Of course, you've been paying attention to this for years, but do you remember a time when this kind of bias that you described really showed up for you in a big way? When you looked at something, you're like, there it is.
So a really good example of that comes in coded bias. So my friend Joy Bolamwini, who did this amazing paper called Gender Shades, that brought public attention to the fact that facial recognition is biased. And so there's this amazing scene in the movie where you see people going in front of the camera, and there's a facial recognition program running on the camera. And the students with light skin go in front of the camera and it recognizes them, right? There's a box that comes up, it says ding, 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 face. And then Joy, who has very dark skin, comes in front of the camera and it fails to recognize her. And you see this and your heart just sinks. Because maybe you hear in the abstract, oh yeah, facial recognition, it's biased, but you don't maybe feel it. And so seeing that moment in the movie just gave me a sinking feeling. And so that's one of the moments that I think about when I think about what is a really profound example of how these systems do not see people with darker skin. And the idea that one would go through the world and not be seen, not be recognized is horrifying.
So how could that specific system be fixed then? What would have to happen for that system to work properly?
Well, so I think properly is something that we get to dig into, right? So the way that facial recognition systems work is they're fed with training data. The training data shows faces, right? The faces are labeled, model, pattern, generate, decision, etc. And one of the problems that was identified was that the training data did not have enough diversity of skin tone. And so the data scientists, like IBM was actually the first to respond. So there's only a couple of big tech firms. We have this image of tech as being like all about startups and diversity, and like, no, it's centralized. There's 9 big tech firms globally. In facial recognition, there's only like 4 companies, I think, who are doing all of it. Everybody is built on the backbone of that. Same thing with cloud computing. It's all Google, Microsoft, or the other one. So facial recognition, there's only a couple of companies doing it. And IBM was the first one to say, oh yeah, this is a problem. We're going to update our data sets to have more visual diversity, more skin tone diversity, and we're going to improve the accuracy of our systems. And yeah, they did improve the accuracy. But one of the really important interventions of Joy Buolamwini's work is she went even further and said, well, listen, that is not good enough, because technologies like facial recognition, when they're used in policing, are disproportionately weaponized against communities of color, against poor communities. And so actually the way to make these systems better is to not use them in policing at all, right? Which is not a computational solution. It's a strategic decision.
To think back to your example about the mortgages, I'm thinking half the time, we don't even know why we were rejected, and we might not question, or we don't even know how to question the rejection. So how are people even being informed about what happened there or what might have happened there?
Well, one of the things that upsets me as a journalist is that people feel like they have to submit to computational decisions, right? We tend to interact with the computer, and then the computer makes a decision and we're like, oh yeah, like that must be true because the computer said it, right? That's a kind of techno-chauvinism. But have you ever like had a bad decision made by computer and then you try and call customer service and like convince them that something is wrong and they don't believe you, right? Like I don't really know what's worse, right? Like as you can imagine, I spend a lot of my time like being mad.
But anyway,
Yeah, you're talking to a chatbot. I know you got to do that thing where you're like operator, and it takes like half an hour to get to an actual human being. So there is something called the Blueprint for an AI Bill of Rights that was just published by the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. And one of the points in this blueprint is that if an automated system makes a decision that goes against you, you would have the right to contest it. and you would have the right to an explanation, a human readable explanation of what happened. And you would have the right to get in touch with somebody reasonably soon who is empowered to change the decision.
But how do I even know that the decision was made by a system in the first place?
Well, I mean, I
Can
think you
assume
can
that?
just assume.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if it's a mortgage or something like that, chances are
Yeah.
that. And again, in the case of this, the mortgage situation, how would the system even know that the applicant was a person of color?
So that's a really good question because people often think, all right, well, there's no category for race that I put in when I
Right.
apply to a bank, right? So in the data-driven world, there are a number of data points that are actually proxies for race. So zip code is the most obvious one. In the US, again, we have a long history of residential segregation. So if you tell me your zip code, I can pretty much guess your race. And if we're talking about these big data systems where they have really granular information, based on, census data and voter files and purchasing data from data brokers. So your credit card company, for example, is like selling data to data brokers, and the data broker is selling it to everybody else. You can buy data from social media companies, basically all of your electronic purchasing and decision information is for sale.
Yeah.
Right? It's a problem, but it's for sale. So if you put together like some subset of that, you can make really accurate assumptions.
And I guess in many ways, AI holds up a mirror to us in terms of what is already happening.
Yeah.
And it reflects back the world that we've created.
Right. And that's not always a good thing. It reflects the world as it is. And I would like us to get, in many cases, closer to the world as it should be.
But the fix is, if we think of machine learning the operative term here, it shouldn't be that hard to fix these systems if the will is there.
Sometimes it is and sometimes it isn't. So one of the things that's so tricky about this is that there aren't hard and fast rules about, okay, it works for this situation, it doesn't work for this, because it's about context. Facial recognition, for example, used in policing on real-time video feeds, that's really high risk, right? Especially for people of color. But facial recognition, the kind of facial recognition you use to unlock your phone, that's really low risk. And for me, it doesn't work half the time anyway, but I don't really care because, I can use my passcode. That's low risk. So it's not about facial recognition is bad. It's not about the technology is bad. It's about the context where we're using the technology and the specific implementation of the technology.
Yeah, but I do think half the time we don't even realize that these things are happening.
Right.
So when we have the right to opt in or opt out, or to say, hold on a minute, I don't like this, we don't even know this is going on.
Yeah. I mean, we need to kind of slow down a little bit, I think. And we need more computational literacy, right? We need more K-12 computational literacy. We need more computational literacy for all of us who are out of K-12. And it's also not, it's not easy to understand this stuff. It's very hard to explain it in the course of a tweet. One of the reasons that I write books is that it's very difficult to explain technical stuff in plain language and explain the social stuff, and then also put it together and talk about the intersection. And when you're writing for the web, they want these 700, 800 word pieces that are really snappy and will get a lot of clicks. And it's really just not, it's very difficult to do that when you have to do all of these things first.
Right. I just wonder if there is a bit of fatigue. I remember the first time I had Googled something and then I saw the same item show up on my Facebook feed and I thought, is outrageous. They're spying on me. And now, of course, that happens like every single time I do anything, even when I'm speaking about something, it
Mhm.
shows up and it's just like, meh, whatever, right? We get tired, we get worn down
Yeah.
as our privacy has been eroded in so many ways. You just sort of don't even know where to start anymore. Like, okay, fine, I accept all cookies. So
Never
I do-
accept all the cookies.
I don't know what else
Yeah.
to do.
Only
But
accept the
there is a bit of
necessary
a-
ones.
You know, it's made such a pain in the neck
Yeah.
to say no,
Mm-hmm.
that it's so much easier to say yes.
Yeah.
So I do think there's a little bit of that fatigue in a
Oh,
way.
yeah. Well, actually, the upper school girls, we talked a lot today
Mhm.
about targeted advertising and why you get those ads following you and why you tend to like think of something or talk with your friend about something, and then you get an ad about it. And well, the explanation for it is that we're all kind of basic. Like we're all thinking about the same things and we think we're really unique, but we're actually not when it comes to our purchasing patterns and when it comes to like thinking about, thinking about like booking your beach vacation in the wintertime. Like we're all doing the same stuff at the same time.
But I do think it also leads to this streamlining of how the world presents itself to us. I felt like I really saw this recently when I was looking for a new home, and every house I looked at had exactly the same style, which was sort of the gray walls.
Yeah,
And
the gray,
yes,
with
everything
white,
gray,
and like
yes, yes, yes.
the
code,
signs that
yes,
say home. Yeah.
and that's every house I ever saw on Instagram before then. So it sort of creates this feedback loop of just
Yeah.
a strange
Flattening of taste.
Yes, flattening of taste.
Yeah.
Now, if we get back to the issue of bias, I think one idea people feel very strongly about is that you can combat bias in tech by getting more diversity in the tech field. And
Really important.
yeah, so I think in part that's the work you did here at school. So talk a bit about how do we get girls and women into this field? How do we encourage them, foster their careers?
So you're all doing a great job already by sending your girls here because the tech curriculum is really terrific. Every time I came up with an idea like, okay, we should do this thing, they're like, oh yeah, we're already doing that.
That's great.
Which is, kind of frustrating for coming up with an idea, but also amazing for the curriculum. So that's a really good step. Another thing is to kind of be aware of the structural forces out there that edge women out of STEM careers and ways to combat that. One really important thing is mentorship. We talked a little bit about this today. And Julie Diana was kind enough to tell me about a study showing that women who have mentors end up being more successful in the long term in STEM careers. Right? So mentorship is going to be key.
I also wanted to ask about, obviously you spend time here talking to the girls about all these different issues, but I do think that's something we have to address with kids at younger and younger ages because they get immersed into this world and they have to understand how this world operates.
Yeah.
This world meaning now the online virtual world.
Yeah.
And how they are being targeted, how they are being fed information. So how do you have these conversations? When do you start? How do you start?
Well, I have a kid and I was really confused when he was little because I felt like, oh, there's no blueprint for digital parenting. Fortunately, there are more resources now. But my rule of thumb was that I parented in the digital sphere the same way that I parented in the real world. So for example, when my kid wanted to play Minecraft, I said, yeah, you can play Minecraft, but you can't play on the public servers. He was like, but all my friends are playing on the public servers. I said, no, like you are not playing on the public server because I would not let you as a, 6-year-old or 8-year-old or whatever, like I would not let you go into a playground by yourself with a whole bunch of strangers and play physically. So I'm not going to let you do the same thing in the digital world, because on the Minecraft public server, you're playing with a bunch of randos. And yeah, your friends are there, but like so are a bunch of randos. And that's not part of my particular parenting style. However, in order to get there, I had to learn about Minecraft. Have anybody had like, oh my God.
No.
Yeah. Oh yeah. All right. Well, I admire you for that, because like it was really tough learning about the Minecraft world without playing it. And I was like, oh my God, why is this fun? But it was fun. So what did I do? Like I made a Minecraft server for them. I was like, here's my credit card. Like I'm gonna give my credit card to the Minecraft server people. And like I made them a private server that they could play, my kid and his friends could play on. And I was like, this is like kind of ridiculous that like I have to do this, but
Here we go.
these are the kinds of things you have to do. You have to learn about the video game systems in order to be consistent.
Yeah. And finally, before we turn to the audience, so start thinking about your questions. What role do educational institutions play in this? Like the school, how do schools create better informed, better digitally informed citizens?
I think that it starts with conversations like this.
Mhm.
I think it starts with parents having conversations with each other about their rules in the digital world,
Mhm.
right? Like when I was figuring out the Minecraft thing, I talked to a lot of other parents and said, okay, what did you do about this? Right? Same way that with screen time, I talked to other parents and I said, all right, like what are you doing? Because that informed the decisions that I made. And so there were decisions that we made that were right for our family that were not right for every family. And I feel like digital literacy and digital citizenship should be part of our conversations at home, among friends. And I'm so glad that it's part of the school curriculum.
And I guess the younger we can start talking about it, the better it is, since they
Oh yeah.
are now literally being born into this whole thing.
Oh yeah. Like the toddlers, they want to grab the phone all the
Oh,
time,
yeah.
right? I saw this hilarious story recently about photos that your kids take of you. You know how your kids take like really bad photos of you, but you keep them on your camera roll anyway because they're kind of hilarious. And it turns out everybody has these and they're all mortifying, but they're kind of an insight into how kids see the world. Right. So
Yeah.
there's something kind of glorious about it.
Well, I think we like to see ourselves from here and they go from down here. So
Yeah.
it's like
Yeah.
not a good thing.
You know, they like,
Like I didn't have that many chins.
Yeah.
Please tell me.
Yeah, exactly. But the kids are also really curious about
Yeah.
the digital world, and they are perfectly fine with having discussions about algorithms. And when you break it down into really small pieces, like, okay, you cannot watch whatever you want on YouTube because there's some bad stuff out there and it's not appropriate for you. Like they understand appropriate and not appropriate. And sometimes they want to do the inappropriate stuff and like, you deal with that. But, generally like kids are pretty ready to have these conversations.
Yeah. All right, I'm gonna start grabbing a microphone and we have one over there. So if you want to raise your hand, one of us will come over and get your question and Meredith will stay on the stage. Do you want to start on this side? Okay. Ooh.
Sorry about that. So when kids are young, they all take English. And knowing where we are with technology today, technology is a language. And how do you feel about a curriculum that is all about what's appropriate on social media? What's appropriate in a text? How do you text in a way that is not inflammatory? How do you look at AI and realize, by the way, AI is only as good as the data that's put into it, which most people don't realize. So I just feel like should we be starting this education and curriculum? Because unlike English, which we all know, they start as a base core curriculum, I feel like technology communication should be another core curriculum at an early age.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Media literacy is important. Information literacy is important. Computational literacy is important. I will let the Agnes Irwin folks here speak about the curriculum here, but I can say that like the pre-K and K kids, like I went and talked to them about artificial intelligence and like they knew what was going on. Like they were in it and they were engaged, right? And it is part of the curriculum, like from day one, right? Yeah.
Questions? All right.
I'm just, when you're talking about the algorithm and the data that's entered, is it possible to change it as a user? So like if I'm on Chat GPT or whatever, and I am searching best poets to share with middle school students, and I get a predominantly white list of poets. And then I start to search like how we used to be able to manipulate Google by different search questions. Does that shift the algorithm, or is it just being specific with searches?
All right, so can you adapt Chat GPT to give you better search results? Yeah, so that's a good question. I do not know the answer. Julie, do you know? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the problem is that, yeah, it's
No.
not going to, like you as a user do not have a lot of power to change the underlying bias. And in fact, one of the things that is a problem about how these systems are constructed is that the creators of the systems don't really understand enough about what's happening to change it. So there's a sort of famous instance of when Google Images labeled images of Black men as gorillas, right? Which is a racist thing to do. And there was an outcry and Google changed it. You know, to their credit, they found this problem, they addressed it. They did not proactively find the problem, but they reacted to it. But how did they fix it? Well, they didn't change the underlying assumptions. They just removed the word gorilla from possible labels. Right, so that's not the ideal fix. It's not addressing the underlying cause. And so when you do see something like, oh, ChatGPT does this bad thing, and then you go and try it yourself, and it doesn't do that anymore, that's because the people at OpenAI are like reading the news and reading all the Reddit forums and then going in and like making little patches. Like they have a very good crisis comms team. Like it's quite impressive. So that's what's happening. Like it's iterative. Yeah.
Hi, you began your talk by assuaging our fears about AI and it's like the downside of it. But I've seen a lot of prominent figures being interviewed in places where they try and put out there that there's some fears with AI. I was curious, aside from bias, do you have any other fears about AI in the future?
Yeah, bias is the one that I'm really concerned about. I'm not really concerned about the robot apocalypse. What are the other, the like existential fears of, you know, of the paperclip machine that like makes so many paper clips that like it drowns out all of humanity. Like, I'm not too worried. And am I worried for my job? Well, I mean, as far as I can tell, people still need teachers. Like remember that era when people said, oh yeah, we're not going to need education anymore because we have the internet and we're just going to be able to give kids the internet and then they're going to learn everything they need to know. Like, yeah, it turned out that was not right. So, you know, AI is going to change some things. But I suspect this new wave of generative AI is going to change a bunch of things. I suspect that those changes are going to be smaller than we currently imagine.
Do you feel like you are an outlier in that opinion? I'm seeing a
Yes.
lot of the other opinions.
Yes.
I'm seeing a lot of the,
Yep.
Okay.
There, the other, like, I don't know, it's not like there are two sides to it, but like the people who are talking about how the house is on fire, like they're getting a lot more airtime. The
Yeah.
existential risk people are
It's more
getting a lot more.
interesting.
It's, it's really like, it's kind of sexy to talk about, right? Like, it's really like, it's dramatic. Like, if you have somebody who's out there saying, oh my God, this is going to change everything, you are not going to know what hit you. You're going to like be attracted to that person. Whereas, you know, I'm here saying like, oh yeah, it's kind of interesting, but like, I mean, I'm not getting as much airtime. On the other hand, it's like, I don't really care about the airtime. Like my deal is like, I'm not about like, I am really excited about like getting on the front page of the New York Times. Like I care about education. I care about public communication. I care about empowering people around computational topics so that they don't get taken advantage of. Yeah. Bill Gates like cares about making a lot of money like from generative AI. And that's why Bill Gates is like telling you that it's the invention of fire. And you know, that's good. That's his hustle. That's all right.
There we go, one there, and then I got one here.
Oh, okay. So when we talk about data streams and putting more data into systems that generate more credible information for African Americans and the like, how do we do that? Like, what does that look like? And how can we all, you know, contribute to the information and knowledge? Is it by writing an article, or is it by sharing critical thought theories into those databases? Now, that's.
Okay, so that's a good question. So how can we contribute to diversifying the training data that's used to create these AI systems? I think one of the things we could do is we can demand that that the training data is diverse. So when your company is making the decision to invest in an AI system, say for, you know, managing hiring, or for, I don't know, what do people buy AI systems for? For automated monitoring of students taking exams, right? You can ask the vendors or require the vendors to show proof that their systems are not biased, right? You can ask the vendors about the diversity of the training data. So that's one way you can use your purchasing power. In terms of actively changing the data sets, I do a lot more work about critiquing them as opposed to creating them. Yeah, because the people who create them are just like a different, I don't know, they're not the people I hang out with, but they're out there. And yeah, that's a really good question. I should talk to them.
Okay, we got one here and then one there.
So my question is actually regarding the comment you made about the fear of replacing workers and so forth on the horizon. I want to wholeheartedly agree with you about the fact that creativity and the folks that are focused, inspiring creativity is key. But I'm speaking strictly as an entrepreneur and a business owner and a casual user of ChatGPT. And I use it every day now. And what I can see happening in my businesses is an instant X factor in scaling my company. Whereas the inefficiencies that I already recognize that are in the company right now, using human beings, from customer service representatives to analysts and even accountants, I can clearly see a lot of that inefficiency being replaced by ChatGPT and others like it. Machine learning, predictive analysis, predictive pricing. I'm going back into my data sets for 15 years. I'm now able to scale infinitely where I could not before. And I just wanted to point that out. That's both exciting and frightening at the same time. But the way I look at my staff, we're going to repurpose them and put them in different roles that that there'll be.
You're not firing them, though, are you?
I've never fired anybody
All right.
that for, we repurpose them and they look for exceptions rather than routine stuff. And that's the way I see that really happening right now. So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you.
There we go.
Just gonna ask Meredith a question. Back to Shanette's question. Is it possible that we ourselves are training the data in any way? So like if I put into my Google search engine, vitamins for women 45 and up, then it will give me what I want, but then it will train the information it gives me on other searches that women have searched for that. So then I'm getting information that other people have searched. Like, are we training our own?
Yeah.
Like I watch my 13-year-old son and he only gets, 1980s sports, clips and, whatever else he's looking for. So is it part of the bias stemming from our own searches? Are we battling ourselves a little bit?
Yeah. I mean, these highly personalized systems are designed to, like, they're designed. So in the case of targeted advertising, for example, it's designed to sell you stuff. But what they're not doing is they're not vetting the things that they're trying to sell you. So they're perfectly happy to sell you, well, they can't really sell you guns because like that restrictions in there, but they're perfectly willing to sell you garbage as well as actual stuff, right? Like, have you done an Amazon search and then you get like just nonsense and you're like looking for the brand name paper towels, for example, and like you get all these, weird off brands of paper towels. It takes you like a while to click through to find the actual paper towels. Like, that's because like the systems are getting flooded with garbage.
Or whatever you said, like, I understand why it would affect
Oh,
me
right. Does
personally,
the
but
common
does it get
crawl
bigger?
include search data?
Yeah, and like what women think about who are 45 or like, and that becomes part of this data set that is skewed against women or skewed against a
Yeah.
particularly marginalized society, group of people,
Yeah.
or like, does it all interlink?
It does, but I don't think that's necessarily related to AI. There are these networks that are called mega nets, and they just connect your search history from Google with your search history from Facebook with what your friends searched for, right? But that's not necessarily a function of AI, but I think AI will actually amplify that in some way.
There's a new book called Mega Nets.
Yeah, I just interviewed the
Oh,
guy.
you did? All right. I'm doing an event with, sorry. All right. I'm doing an event with him next week.
Oh, he's
So,
awesome.
yeah.
Yes.
All right. So I
there
guess
you
I
go.
got to read it now.
Sorry, little interstitial, but I found that really kind of shocking is that, anything I've ever done is now connected in some way. So if you think about every app on your phone and everything you've ever bought and searched for, it's all basically stirred into this pot of information. Yes, yes. Hence all the houses look the same, Yeah. Hold on, we got two here and then maybe one here.
I had a question, and it had to do with what she was, the young lady in the back asked about the students learning here about AI. How could we as parents keep up with everything that's going and growing and changing with respect to AI? So we're not kind of like left behind, because honestly, when I look at something, I think I know it, and then the next day or the next week, it changes and it's like something completely different and I'm out of the loop. So how do you keep up?
So chapter 2 of my new book. So that's where it starts. Like, you need kind of a base level of knowledge about how this stuff works. And so then when you see, so you need a base level of knowledge of how AI works. And then when there's a new AI thing, you can say, okay, well, I know how the old thing worked. This is how this new thing must work. Right. And so that's kind of how you keep up. It doesn't actually change that much. So the way that we program today is kind of, it's largely the same as the way people programmed in the 1970s. Like, we have fancier interfaces now, but there's this thing called the command line, which is where you like type in code, and that hasn't changed. It's the same, like we're using the same programs that we used back in the 1970s. One of the things that I read about in the book is the ways that there are social artifacts of the 1950s even in our computational systems. Because things like school information systems, which are like the big core system that schools, universities feed off of, those things were set up in the 60s. And people have added to them, but they haven't gone in and changed the underlying architecture. So we're still dealing with this hodgepodge. In insurance, do we have anybody in insurance here? Insurance systems or insurance companies are still often running mainframes from, I don't know, what was that? That was like the 1980s, 70s and 80s, right? Like they still work. And like you still have like a handful of people who are programming in Fortran, which, I mean, when was the last time somebody said Fortran to you, right? But it's out there.
All right, we got a question here.
So from everything, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm listening to everything and it sounds like the data, the math part that you said, AI is math, is taking these broad strokes to aggregate things that happen most frequently. So do you have any optimism for how the outliers will be heard, how creativity will push things forward? Like, what are your thoughts on drowning out unique voices?
One of the things that I think is one of the lenses I think we can use to think about this is the lens of disability. So I had talked with the girls today about automated hiring systems. So there are these systems where you take a video interview and then you upload the video and the system analyzes your responses, right? Air quotes. Because the metrics that they're using are things like, does the person maintain eye contact with the camera? Well, if you're blind, you're not necessarily maintaining eye contact. Your eyes might be looking in different directions. And if the video interview system is calculating that as a point in your favor or a point against you, then it's discriminating against you based on disability, right? So we need to think about when we design computing systems, we design for the greatest number of cases, but there are always going to be edge cases. And what developers do is we say, all right, well, I'm just going to design for most situations. And I'm going to worry about the edge cases later. And then we tend to not get back to the edge cases. But when it comes to something like disability, or it comes to, just big decisions in people's lives, like we live in the edge cases. So that's not really an acceptable paradigm to only design for the majority, right? So we have to think differently. And when we're thinking about, having diverse teams of people in the room, we need to ensure that we have diverse teams of people in the room creating these technologies. Because I wear glasses, but I don't have the issue of my eyes going in different directions. But a friend of mine who's blind is the one who explained this to me. And I thought, oh, that is something that you understand out of your experience. And I didn't understand out of my experience. And now I need to think differently about what's going on in these systems because of your experience. And I was really grateful to her for that.
Okay, we have time for one last question. So here you go. Sorry.
Hey, Meredith, thank
Hi.
you. Anthony Bennett here. Incredible talk. So I struggle with this one a little bit because there are a number of variables that go into these algorithms. So you have the data, which is difficult to change. You have the business logic, like the formulas that score risk for insurance companies or banks or credit card companies, right? So where do we focus our energy and effort time on solving the problem? All of the above is probably the easy answer, but just curious, like where would you prioritize time and attention to solving some of the biases, the conflicts that we have with AI? So that's the question.
Yeah.
The
All
other-
right.
the other-
Well, so I think that I've been really interested in public communication around these issues, kind of raising awareness around the issues. But then the super nerdy thing that I did in addition is I built some software. So part of what I did as the research for this book is I built a platform for algorithmic auditing. Right, so I wrote a lot about how we can audit algorithms to uncover bias. But then the solution is we use algorithmic auditing methods. And then I also built this platform to so companies can take algorithms and kind of feed in the data and then privately discover whether or not there was bias, and then you can remediate it and then you can retest it. And it's a continuous thing and it fits with the current regulatory paradigms. And so you could just buy that. Yeah.
All right.
But I'm very excited about having more conversations like this. I'm excited about people building things, and I'm excited about the next generation knowing that these problems exist and coming up with solutions that we haven't thought of yet.
Well, thank you so much for a great conversation and for all of your insights into this topic. And for all of you for coming here and for being with us this evening and for just this wonderful space. Can we just give a round of applause for how beautiful it is? Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, and literally just. Yeah. Yeah, it's good. Where are you talking to?
At NYU.
Okay. You want me to? I can, I don't know, sometimes I like.
I work here. Oh, yes, yes, yes.